It's the All Things Strange podcast. We are your hosts, Agent Anderson and
Special Agent Natasha.
Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can find all of our wonderful links in the description on the Linktree, where you can find our Patreon, our Discord, our merchandise, and more. This week's episode, the Sonoma Developmental Center. It's a very sinister sounding name, right?
It is a very sinister sounding. And I have read about it. I've been hearing about it my whole life since I grew up in the area.
Yeah, and I've been driving by it for years and I never knew what it was, and I just finally decided to look it up one day. But before we get started, we've got a couple of items of business. First off, we have 2 levels of Patreon for everybody out there if you'd like to support the show. The first level will get you bonus episodes and after hours, and the second level will get you the ability to vote on upcoming topics. Not this time, though. I wanted to do a Halloween-y kind of a show, and this one was not voted on. I just decided on this one myself. But usually, everybody gets to vote on the topics. And the second thing is we have a brand new host to the show, Agent Natasha, straight out of Russia.
That's right. I come from Russia. And in Russia, we don't let people vote like this. I mean, we say we do, but it's not true. So we always pick in Russia. They always pick for us.
Yeah, Putin, right? He gets to decide all this stuff.
He's a handsome man. He rides a horse really nicely.
Yeah, I know that horse photo got me going a little bit.
That's
He's
right.
a very sexy man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he has his black belt in judo too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, yes. Now that made him better.
All right, so let's get to it. Just a fair warning for everybody. This one gets pretty dark. We're going to talk about some really messed up stuff. So this is not for the squeamish at all. The Sonoma Developmental Center, it's right down the street from maybe 20 minutes down the street. If you take the back roads to get to like Napa and Sonoma from Santa Rosa, instead of the freeway, it's just right along there. You have this huge campus of empty buildings and there's nothing there. And I always thought it was kind of weird. I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it was some college or something, but there's never anybody there. And the grounds are upkept though. The lawn is mowed. The buildings all look relatively nice. So it's just a strange place, and you just kind of get a creepy feeling driving through there. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until fairly recently that I actually looked up what this place was. And after reading about this place for a little bit, the first question that came to my mind was, do evil people converge on a certain place? Or is there like an evil energy at a place that sort of like twists people into being bad? You know, 'cause you read about it a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah. I've been hearing about it my whole life. Like there was a lot of torture that happened there. I just think people look for weak areas. I think bad people are just searching for ways they can get in there and, disturb the peace without getting caught.
They're sort of drawn towards certain victims. That could be, yeah. So this place is in Eldridge, Sonoma. That's the actual location. And it's gone through a couple of names throughout the years. Like, for example, I think early on it was known as the California Home for the Care and Training of Feeble-Minded Children. That's what it was first known as. And
so sad.
Yeah. And
here's my child. They're feeble-minded. That doesn't make you feel good.
Yeah. And this is often referred to as an asylum, but it's actually not an asylum. An asylum is for people with, mental health problems, like schizophrenia or something like that. I'm not sure what terminology to use these days.
It's feeble-minded. So then feeble-minded is just like slow. They're not hearing voices. They're not maniacs. They're just a little behind or really behind, actually. Some of them can't. Nonverbal, that sort of thing, paralyzed. Yeah,
developmentally challenged to the point where they're not able to care for themselves, and their families have a very difficult time caring for them. Some of them had cerebral palsy, some of them had Down syndrome, some of them had multiple things, stuff like that, to where they required pretty much constant care and their families, if you got to work, how are you going to constantly care for your child? That's our cryptids are getting a little excited for some reason. I'm not sure why.
They're feeble-minded.
Yeah, they're feeble-minded. Settle down there, buddy.
So when you said cerebral palsy, that's surprising to me. So we're looking at a population where people could be nonverbal, but they're not necessarily, like they say, feeble-minded. People with cerebral palsy can have a very full inner life. They can be very mentally strong, just they can't verbalize it.
That's true. Yeah, that's from when I read.
That makes this story even more horrific. When you think about it that way, that these are people who are, very cognizant.
All right, where were we? Oh, we didn't talk about just how beautiful the area is. It's gorgeous there.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely gorgeous. And where's my wallet? I got one of their cards. I don't have it with me. I'm not going to go find it. On the way there, you will pass a little French bakery. It's going to be on the right-hand side if you're coming from the north. Have you ever been there?
No.
I forget what it's called. Let me look it up real quick because it's really good. Les Pascals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little family-owned business. And actually, that's the woman that helped us.
Being so close to this horrible place, I wonder if this bakery is haunted as well.
It could be
like one of those places that's built on an Indian burial ground, and you're getting, body parts mixed with your croissant.
Yeah, who knows?
Croissant.
That would be interesting, anyways. Some spirit cooking there.
Yeah, croissant comes alive and starts to eat you.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
But yeah, it's a really beautiful place. And you wouldn't think, if you didn't know the history, if you're just driving through there, you wouldn't necessarily think all these things that happened there. And to be fair, not every patient was mistreated, just a lot of them were. And this place, I don't think I said, this place was opened in 1891, and it was finally closed down in 2018. So it'd been open for quite some time.
And it's a beautiful brick building, correct?
Yeah, the main building
The main building's gorgeous.
That one's been entered into the Register of Historic Places.
Mm-hmm.
So that building will stay. They're going to develop everything else. They'll probably knock everything else down. But the building will stay. Hopefully they renovate it or something. Because right now it's in a pretty bad state.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go in it or anything. It's dangerous. Like I wouldn't even break into it. Because, for example, some vandals turned on a fire hose and it wasn't discovered for months. So, water damage, floors collapsing, mold, asbestos, all kinds of stuff in there. So you probably don't want to go in there. And
it was just closed at the very end of 2018, right?
I think I read somewhere that the brick building was closed before then.
Okay.
It was condemned before then.
So the patients, where did they live? They didn't live in the big, beautiful brick building. They lived in
all the outbuildings.
And the outbuildings are falling apart, decaying, right?
No, they actually look like you could still live in them. A lot of them.
Oh, they did?
Mm-hmm.
So when you went there, right, you did see things falling off the ceiling and...
Yeah. So if you look in, you go at night, it's really creepy. We went there at night and then during the day. And at night, all the buildings are lit up.
Mm-hmm.
And the lights are on. You can see in the buildings, and there's nothing in there. There's no furniture. You see an occasional chair once in a while, or, maybe a pencil on the ground or something. But there's no furniture. There's no people. There's nothing in there.
6 years, they've kept the lights on.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? Do you think there's a nefarious reason for that?
No, I think they just want to prevent vandals from getting in there and doing stuff. Or maybe people
I do think lights would help.
Yeah.
It's not exactly in a super busy area.
No, there are people driving through there, but it's pretty quiet there. Yeah. But also maybe if somebody goes in there and injures themselves or gets asbestos or lead paint poisoning or something like that, they could probably sue the state because right now it's owned by the state. But yeah.
Everyone listening to this podcast, now you know. Just break in someplace.
In California.
Get injured. And then you're set for life.
Yeah, pretty much, right? I've heard rumors. I don't know if they're true, but
the ghosts made me do it. I couldn't help it. I was sucked in.
So the campus itself, the big brick building is the main building, but I mean that building really stands out. But the entire area is a little under 1,000 acres. I forget the exact number. Established in 1891, the Sonoma Developmental Center occupies a cherished spot in the Sonoma Valley. Oh, this is from their website. comprising approximately 180 acres of developed campus and 765 acres of natural areas. SDC provided a serene and therapeutic setting for individuals with developmental disabilities. Its extensive trail system and essential water infrastructure, including 2 reservoirs and a treatment plant, enhanced its significance. For over a century, SDC offered specialized care, earning national recognition as a healing community. As the Valley's primary employer, it fostered deep connections with neighboring communities until its closure in 2018. Despite this, SDC's legacy persists, leaving an enduring mark on the region's history. So that's from their website.
That sounds very wholesome.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Until you realize, like, most of the people that worked there in the end were fired and or arrested. Did no mention of that?
Well, I think that the bad people were probably in the minority.
Oh, okay.
Because
well, it was the major. They claim it's the major employer of the area. So
yeah, well, not anymore. But there were a lot of cases that I read about where the people who got caught were reported by other staff members. So there were a lot of good people there working who wanted to do good things. It wasn't everybody, but there were some individuals that were abusive. And you have a population where a lot of them are nonverbal and they're easy to abuse. They can't.
It's the Zimbardo effect, right?
Yeah. Well,
Abu Ghraib.
What is that?
So in the 70s, there was a Professor Zimbardo at Stanford who made a name for himself because he was trying to look at, good and evil. And if humans were, were capable of being directed toward evil instead of good. If if we're innately, juggling these two sides to ourselves and we just need a little push to become evil, as he's looking, for reasons behind what happened in World War II, the Nazis, all that. So what he found was he separated the students into 2 groups. One group were prisoners, one group were prison guards, and they had built this fake prison system, and the experiment was supposed to run for something like 3 months or something, but it ended up only going 7 days because what happened, the prison guards very quickly started to abuse their powers over the prisoners. They really got that feeling on the inside that the prisoners were beneath them. They were told, to treat them as prisoners, and very quickly devolved into some evil shenanigans. Like they were just, abusing their powers. Some guy got hit. Someone was, forced to do embarrassing, humiliating things. Very much like Abu Ghraib. That it showed that was what was going to happen. They had to stop the experiment after 7 days because it was just too dramatic. It was hurting too many people, and they didn't want to be sued at Stanford.
And that's just an experiment with college kids. So I can imagine in a situation where you have staff members who are essentially prison guards sometimes in this case. Yeah, I think I've heard of that one before. Yeah, that's pretty scary stuff if you think about it.
Yeah. How
quickly people can become dehumanized. And especially these patients who had severe disabilities.
Absolutely.
I could see that being the case. But yeah, reading that website description, it was pretty funny because they make it sound like such a great place, but they're not telling the whole story.
I want to go there.
Yeah. If any place
waste treatment facility, it sounds fabulous.
Yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, can I go take like a week there and just kind of relax? But if any place is haunted, this one is definitely haunted. After reading some of the stuff that I read. It was originally opened to care for disabled children, but they were so disabled that they were pretty much there for life. So over time, originally in 1891, it was just for kids, but over time they graduated to adults, and they had a wide variety of patients, everything from minor birth defects like a club foot. The parents might drop them off there and be like, there's something wrong with this one. We don't want it. To more serious disabilities such as like epilepsy and Down syndrome. And there were even seriously disabled patients that were immobile and nonverbal who couldn't really do much at all for themselves. And I read that the patients who were seriously disabled were crammed into overcrowded rooms, and patients that were mobile or could move around were put to work in the fields. So that's kind of interesting. They're going to make some money off of them.
It does sound like an old-timey prison, right?
Yeah, it kind of does sound like a prison, yeah.
And on the chain gang.
And a lot of the patients were dropped off by their families, and their families didn't really visit that often. So even if they were verbal, if they were experimented on or something, who are they going to tell?
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody to tell, right? They're stuck there. In 1909, California was the third state to pass a compulsory sterilization law, and they passed further laws in 1913 and 1917, which expanded who was eligible for this. And if a person was deemed a recipient of this, there was no way for the patient to appeal. There was no notice to the family. It was just some like Judge Dredd type stuff where if a doctor said, okay, this person needs it, let's give it to him. And that was it. That was, judge, jury, and executioner there. And after the fact, there was no legal recourses. Many people tried to sue after the fact, but none of them were successful because it was perfectly legal at the time. The idea of forced sterilization. Oh, we're going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to ask, what kind of experiments were they subjected to?
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay.
I wanted to talk. Let's check our time here. Okay, we're doing pretty good on time. I wanted to mention a little bit about the forced sterilization movement. It was based on the idea of eugenics, or improving the...
It all goes back to the Nazis.
Yeah, well, no, this predates the Nazis.
Oh, really?
This was really popular in a lot of places, Europe, the United States, and the idea was to improve the genetic pool of the population. But as you can imagine, that's a really slippery slope. Who decides what genetic factors or, what's desirable and what's not? And it turns out it gets really uncomfortable real quick when you start reading that stuff, and you think, that's not that long ago, I've probably have living relatives that I've met who are no longer with us who are proponents of this back in the day. It's not that long ago.
Oh, wow. That's frightening.
Yeah. And this eugenics lasted for a long time until after World War II, the Nazis kind of just took it way too far. So then it was less popular after that.
Well, I have a cousin who had to do IVF, and all her life, she's a beautiful brown-eyed girl. All her life, she wanted a blue-eyed baby. She paid $10,000 to have her baby have blue eyes.
Wow! So I've heard that they can do that.
Do that.
They can actually do that now. That's crazy. I just saw a newspaper article. Well, on my phone, but a news article about how they're starting to develop the same thing, but for IQ.
Wow.
Yeah. So
sign me up. I want an IQ boost.
I know. No, but from what I understand, they'll fertilize a bunch of embryos, like 100 different embryos, and then they'll look at the genetics and decide which ones have the higher IQ, and then those will go to term, and the other ones are, you would assume, discarded.
We're like a decade away from Gattaca.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent movie, by the way.
Oh, yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Ethan Hawke, yes.
Yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. And the technology is there. Like if you go to the grocery store, the gas pump, they could easily take your DNA profile. Like there's no way around it. So if they wanted to, they could Gattaca the place right now, Yeah. It's pretty scary stuff. But that was based on eugenics, the forced sterilization, and that went on for a long time. And there were a lot of cases. It wasn't just severely disabled people. It was people who, let's say, if you were in interracial marriage, or not even marriage, just relationship, if you engaged in sexual activity outside of marriage, anything that was deemed to be, deviant by society, you might end up with a forced sterilization. There was one case I read about where a woman or a young lady, I think they weren't specific about the age, but probably like high school age, had relations outside of marriage, and her parents had her sterilized. And years later, she tried to sue, but they're like, well, it was legal at the time. That's your parents' right to do that.
As a parent, to say, okay, we never want to have grandchildren. We never want you to have the experience of having children. That's pretty radical in American society, where even people who like are pro-choice and all that, they're still like, oh, we value the life of children. We want more children.
Yeah. And if you look into the history of this, I won't go into all of it, but the reasons you could use to forcibly sterilize somebody was pretty much anything. I mean, if somebody's rude to you at the checkout line
Oh my
or
God.
whatever.
Can you imagine what Karens would do with that?
I know.
There was this lady yelled at me for having my dog off leash the other day. She'd probably have me sterilized like nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm good with that, though. I don't want any more kids.
I get the impression, though, that this was targeted more towards younger people, like minors even. I'm not entirely sure, though.
Well, yeah, because how else do you impinge on someone's like liberties if they're an adult?
Yeah.
And they have their capabilities. You don't have a power of attorney. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure plenty of adults got this treatment as well. Now, you think this is something that happened a long time ago, and, they wouldn't do that these days. But it lasted a lot longer than you might think. For instance, Oregon's board wasn't dissolved until 1983, and their last forced sterilization was in 1981. That's not that long ago. I mean, it is, but it isn't.
No. Yeah.
And there were also some cases as recent as 2020 in the United States where illegal immigrants were forced sterilization, forcibly sterilized at the border, and that was illegal. And
I hadn't heard about that. How could that possibly happen?
Exactly. How could that possibly happen? I don't know. It's pretty crazy. But just, that's what I meant when it gets really uncomfortable real quick.
It does.
There was a guy, F.O. Butler, who started there in 1918, and he got the job as like the head guy in charge of this stuff, and he personally performed at least 1,000 sterilizations, probably more. And the Sonoma Developmental Center was a world leader in forced sterilizations, not just like a local leader, but they probably did more than any other place in the world. About 20,000 people were sterilized in California alone, not just there, but at other places too. We don't know the exact numbers because records weren't necessarily well kept. 60% were considered mentally ill, 35% mentally deficient.
I wonder what the difference between mentally ill and mentally deficient are.
Mentally ill could be anything from like schizophrenia to, a woman with PMS, okay. Stuff like that. Or a woman who cheated on her husband. The husband could...
I do feel mentally deficient when I have PMS.
But like if a woman cheated on her husband, the husband could take her in and have her sterilized as sort of like a punishment, that kind of thing. In 1918, there was a Spanish flu outbreak at the hospital or the developmental center, and dozens of patients died. How many, we don't know exactly, but enough. And that's where the light and fluffy part of the episode ends. Now we get into the dark stuff.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
I have a question really quick. So it sounds like this was a facility primarily for minors for a long time, but then it became like a facility where minors would live and become adults and presumably would live out their life, right?
Yeah, and also I think at some point they started taking adults as well. Well, originally it was just for children.
Interesting. So they were sterilizing mostly minors?
The records are hard to find. Like I couldn't find specifics, but I got the impression that they were sterilizing people of all ages. So... who knows?
With parental consent, too, I imagine. No, they were allowed to do this without parental consent?
Yeah, without parental consent and without parental notification.
Oh, wow.
They could just do it, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So what other horrible things were done there, you might ask? How could it possibly get worse than people dying in forced sterilizations? Well... human experimentation, of course. Did you read about any of the human experimentation?
No, I don't know anything about that. I've heard lots of stories, lots of ghoulish stories. People say that when they drive by, they get goosebumps and they feel the evil emanating from it.
That's definitely true. Like, I'm not normally into the ghosty type stuff, but the place is definitely creepy when you drive through. So you had a population there where you had a lot of, as we've said, nonverbal patients. And you didn't really need to get consent from them because they were, nonverbal, in some cases nearly vegetative states. But like we mentioned earlier, some of them were cerebral palsy sufferers, and that's a disability where your brain might work just fine. It just you have problems with motor control, and that can be mild. It can be severe. So it is you could have a perfectly normal functioning person, and in their head, they're normal. They just can't talk, or they might not be able to walk, or whatever their particular symptoms might be.
Which makes the horror story so much scarier, because whatever's going on with them, they're completely aware and awake. It's like you're imprisoned. It's like you're a mime, but it's a real wall, and it's even worse. And terrible things are happening to you. That's so frightening. That might be the most frightening thing I could possibly imagine.
Well, I did find one story. 3-year-old Mark Del Mullen was a patient admitted in 1958 at the age of 3 for cerebral palsy. He had a very severe case where he couldn't really move his limbs and he was nonverbal, but his family said that you could tell when you talked to him, he would react in such a way to where he was probably had a normal brain as far as being able to understand things, like we were saying. So he had pretty bad symptoms, and they did experiments on him, things like injecting his brain full of gases, or not full of, but they would inject gases into his brain to get good x-ray images, and that would be a very painful procedure. They did not ask his family for permission to do this, and they obviously did not get consent from the patient. It was a 3 to 5-year-old kid, or 3 to 6-year-old, before he died. But that's not what actually killed him. In the early 60s, patients at the Sonoma Developmental Center were dosed with radiation as an experiment. Because back then, they didn't really know what radiation would do to people, what would be a lethal dose.
Meanwhile, nuclear weapons are being developed and set off at a crazy rate every year.
Yeah, so they would dose patients, particularly nonverbal ones, to see what happened to them. And Mark was one of the patients who died based on symptoms that would be consistent with radiation poisoning. He died in 1961, and his case is a little problematic as well, because his family said that doctors recommended him going to the Sonoma Developmental Center. So it looks like they were probably getting some kickbacks or some payola to refer patients there specifically for these experiments. So whoever was running the experiments would say, okay, we need this number of people to experiment on. If you have a patient that matches this, send them in and we will experiment.
Yeah. Well, initially, radiation was considered to be a potentially life-saving tool, right? I mean, not like the kind of radiation we have now, but they'd send people in with like facial hair. They'd have women go in for acne and facial hair and go put your face and get your face radiated. And then, of course, eventually it would drop off, and that's how they knew it was bad. I know there was a whole series of these in Canada, machines set up to make women more beautiful, and it ended up being terrible.
Yeah, I saw things where people would irradiate their gardens because it would be good for their plants. And
did that work?
I doubt it.
For a good tomato.
Yeah. Well, hey, you never know. Maybe have you seen the movie Attack of the Killer Tomatoes? I'm pretty sure that's how that
they were radiated.
Probably.
That was a great movie. Tomatoes slowly come after you by rolling down the hill. You're like, I can't get away.
It's pretty silly. That's a good one. I haven't seen that in years.
Yeah. Highly recommended for Halloween.
Yeah. So Mark's sister Karen is actually the one who kind of figured out what had happened to him. Her first clue was many years later, she saw an article in the newspaper that claimed 16,000 patients had been used for radiation experiments at state hospitals, not just the Sonoma Developmental Center. And she also found that between the year 1955 and 66, 1,100 cerebral palsy patients had been used for experiments as well. Wow. She found her brother in the papers that were released for these things, and he was specimen number 8732.
They referred to him as a specimen.
Gives you an idea of the mindset of these people running these.
Chilling.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's
humanizing.
Even somebody who's severely mentally disabled, they're still people. They still feel pain, even though they may not be able to play a game of chess, like whatever, but they still are people. They're not, germs in a petri dish. They're not specimens.
Yeah. I know we give Elon Musk a hard time, but the Neuralink, is the potential for it to help people who are in those states is really high. And so I give him praise for that, but then the monkeys.
Yeah. I know they have to experiment on somebody for that
Oh,
stuff.
I guess so, man.
It's pretty
It's awful.
pretty awful sometimes.
Hmm.
But I'm waiting for people who get that installed to get the advertising installed as well. Could you
Oh my
imagine?
God, having ads in your
Yeah,
brain. Oh
there's
no, I would
there's no
go
ad blocker
insane.
for that. They're just going to inject it
Uh,
directly.
and then we'll all be like zombies because
Yeah.
once it's in our brain, we'll just have to go and get it because
Yeah.
the potential for an advertisement to just run repeatedly until you do what they're saying. Oh my goodness. No, that's a terrifying future right there.
Yeah. Isn't that scary?
Ooh, is where we put in the scary noises, sound effects.
Yeah, I should have queued some up on my mixing
I
board.
do have goosebumps right now.
I can't imagine the horrors that poor Mark must have suffered, and chances are pretty good that his brain worked just fine and he just couldn't move or
Mm.
talk. Just imagine being trapped in there and people
Mm-mm.
doing these horrible experiments on him and dosing him with the radiation that basically melts your inside. That killed him. You can find an article about it called "A Dark Chapter in Medical History" on CBS News if you want to read more. And there's plenty of other coverage of it, but that's just one of the ones that I found. But let's move on to more wonderful stuff. It's unknown how many of the patients there were experimented on. And the reason for that is because the Sonoma Developmental Center did not run the experiments. Other organizations would run the experiments on patients there getting like a government grant or whatever it was, and they kept the records. Sonoma Developmental Center didn't keep the records. And of course, if you were doing horrible things like this, you probably wouldn't keep the records for very long, or at least never release them publicly. So we don't know the exact number, but it was probably a fairly high number of patients throughout the years that had horrible things done to them.
Mhm.
All right, so let's talk about some more specific cases of horrible things that happened there. June 4th, 1999, a patient described as severely disabled overdosed on antidepressants. Now, because of the nature of the death, it wasn't clear if it was homicide, suicide, or accidental. But let's just stop and think about this for a second. It's not like the patients have access to the drug lockup wherever they kept the drugs. Their caretaker, the nurse or staff member, had to give them the drugs. So how did they get their hands on enough antidepressants to overdose on? I'm guessing it wouldn't be that easy to do. You'd probably have to take a whole lot of pills. Were they murdered? Probably wasn't suicide. If somebody left the pills lying around, it's at least death through I don't know, what would you call it? Like negligence at the very
Oh
least.
yeah, someone should have been held accountable for something like
Yeah. But of course these patients are not really able to communicate probably
that. Mhm.
all that well, so easy target if you wanted to murder somebody, I'm guessing.
Yes, you could. I mean, you could be a serial killer and go into one of those facilities. We hear about the angels of death in the
Yeah.
nursing profession. Yeah, that could definitely call to someone to come in there, and then all these accidents happen. I mean, I don't know if you're going to get to that later, but the field where people are buried at 47-year period.
Yeah, we could talk about that right now. Yeah.
47-year period where 1,500 people died.
At least.
That's intense. That's a
Yeah.
serial killer's playground right there. I mean, and they're buried without any sign, any notification. So they're all out there. You could be walking on top of all these dead bodies, and apparently no one's held accountable.
Yeah. We don't know how they died. There's no records of it. We don't know where they were buried.
1,500 people.
People said that they were buried somewhere behind the main building, but we went and we looked, and there's just kind of like a hill or a mountain back there. I didn't see anywhere that looked like it would be graves, but they could be anywhere.
Yeah.
I
You
read,
wouldn't be able to tell. That
Yeah.
was, what, like 50 years ago, 60 years ago
yeah,
when that stopped?
I read that they were cremated and put into a mass grave. Did you read anything like that?
I didn't see that in the Wikipedia article.
Oh yeah,
I
but
believe it. That would make sense.
yeah, that'd make a lot more sense than having to just bury that many
So
people.
is there a crematorium on site, though?
There must be, right? They have. I heard that the morgue was in the basement of the brick building, but I don't know if that's true or not. I just read it somewhere, like on probably Reddit or something.
See, that's why we should break in and see if we could find like a place where bodies would be cremated.
So I would never break in, but I know somebody who would.
Mm.
A different agent who would never admit publicly to doing something illegal would definitely be interested in, getting into some of these buildings and poking
Yeah.
around. I wouldn't, though.
Is there a giant furnace? I mean,
I know, there has to be, right?
yeah.
All these old creepy buildings have giant furnaces.
Yeah. Who would be working there and keeping, the whole thing.
Yeah, very
Spooky.
creepy.
Yeah.
I brought Agent Ether. She wasn't really interested in poking around that much.
Don't blame her.
She liked the area. It's very pretty, but I don't think
you don't want to bring home a ghost, though, a disgruntled,
well,
previous patient.
the hitchhiker effect. Have you heard of that?
No.
That's where paranormal stuff can follow you home.
Ooh, like Poltergeist.
Yeah, exactly.
They took it from their home, destroyed everything, and then they went to a hotel. Remember the end of that movie was so good.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
And there it was. Static on the TV again came with them. Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. It's well known. It's well known that some demons, infest the person. Some entities will go wherever the chosen victim goes.
Yeah, so you can get a hitchhiker. It's not just the place that's haunted; it can be people too. Apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, wild stuff. Let's see. Okay, so the next one I have is in 1999, a female patient overdosed on opioids, very similar to the antidepressant one. Nobody knows where the patient got them. They don't know if it was murder or accidental but it's hard to believe that would be accidental.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, maybe she was just looking to party.
Yeah, yeah, right? I guess.
But where did she, maybe she came in with them, on her person.
Yeah.
And then, or maybe it was slipped to her by one of the guards who wanted to abuse her. It's hard to say. Did they come to any conclusion on that?
Nope. There's no way to know because there's no evidence and nobody's going to admit to it.
Oh my God. See, do you think could this ever happen today? I mean, now we have cameras everywhere. In a facility like that, it's hard for me to believe that they didn't have cameras, post 1990s at least.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of this stuff happened pretty recently.
Mm-hmm.
That one was in 1999. That's not that long ago. So this stuff is pretty recent. And I have cases as recent as 2015 that I read about, which is really not that long ago.
No.
So this stuff was happening continuously. The records are not well kept. There are some in Sacramento you can find, and there are supposedly some on site as well, but the public doesn't have access to them. So who knows? Maybe somebody will get access someday and they can go through there. But even a lot of this stuff, there won't be any record of what happened. There might just be, okay, patient deceased and then whatever, but they're not going to say how or why. These are just the ones we know about, in other words, right?
That's a travesty because, we can't change things for the future if we don't know about the past.
Yeah, exactly. In 2000, another patient wandered away from their room who was supposed to be watched and were struck by a car and died. One of the bigger cases was in 2012. The director received an anonymous phone call about taser attacks. It turns out that Archie Melora, he was arrested the next day after the report. He was arrested and found with a gun and a taser in his car. He'd been working there for 14 years, and it turns out that 12 of his patients were found with burn marks consistent with tasers. All of these people were severely disabled and non-communicative or non-verbal.
Mm-hmm. How long had he been working there?
14 years.
14 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if they found 12 with marks, and those marks eventually they fade, so I imagine he was pretty prolific with that taser. That's wild.
And can you just imagine these poor patients they need care and they're being tortured by their caretaker. It's really wild stuff.
Well, I had a stepfather that loved to torture animals and stuff. He just thought it was, funny, and he found it interesting, I guess.
Wow, that's crazy. That's what serial killers do.
Oh yeah,
they start with animals.
Yeah.
Did you have deaths in your area that were unexplained?
Probably. I'm afraid to look into it any closer. I haven't had communication with him in a long time, So, but he did start selling vitamin water in a pyramid scheme. So that's where he is now. If someone's selling you vitamin water, don't go to his house. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, stay clear. Buy it from the grocery store, right? They have vitamin water there.
Third party's better, yes.
Do you know what the craziest part about this taser attacks were, though?
What?
Guess what penalty Melora had for what he did? Guess what they did to him? Jail.
Oh, I
Jail
don't
time,
know.
fines,
The way you're
anything?
saying that, I'm thinking they threw him a party.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much. He was fined $190
$190
for the loaded
abusing
gun.
patient?
For the loaded gun,
Oh,
because you can't just have those.
uh-huh.
And for the patients, nothing.
Oh my
Nothing
God. He was set
at
free.
all. Yep.
And
No jail time, no penalty, nothing.
I wonder what happened to the person who turned him in, because that person must live in fear then. He's free, can take revenge.
Yeah. It was an anonymous tip. Probably somebody working there saw him.
God, that's terrifying. You
Yeah.
can get away with that?
He got away with it. He was fired, but who knows where he went.
It's like those priests that just are moved from diocese to diocese, or
That's a whole
yeah.
that's a whole other topic that's like a real conspiracy.
But once you're in, nothing bad really ever happens to you.
Yeah,
It's
it's
crazy.
what kind of person would be higher up in the organization and they find somebody doing something like that, and instead of like turning them into the authorities or something.
No, they always want to cover it up.
Yeah, they cover it up. It's the strangest thing.
Yes, I heard about abuse at a preschool that I was working at, like from some very bad, scary abuse, and the preschool didn't want the teachers to be informed.
Wow.
Because they were worried that then it was a private school, so they were worried they would lose money.
That's crazy.
So they wanted to keep it all hush hush. Yeah.
I think you'd want to do the right thing.
No,
but
that's modern times right there.
Yeah, that's wild stuff. The last one, I have a whole bunch more of these, but it's getting a little close to an hour here, so we'll just do one more of these. Maybe I'll do the rest in like a bonus episode or something. But another case so the taser case hit the press, and this other case hit the press, and those are pretty much the two big cases from 2012 that eventually shut down the Sonoma Developmental Center, which was the last patient left in 2018. But in 2012, there were 36 reports of raped, forced oral sex, and molestation, with one patient impregnated that went on, as far as we know, from about 2009 and 2012. None of these cases were investigated, and no evidence was collected by the center. In one case, the report states male caregivers were assigned to a patient even after a complaint of abuse by a different staff while the patient was bathing. So there's, I think we mentioned him earlier, Rex Bradford Salyer, right? You mentioned him earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was the one who was found guilty of having sexual intercourse with someone incapable of giving legal consent, 2 counts of oral copulation, and abusing a dependent adult. So if we know of 36, imagine just how many more there were.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many pregnancies there would be if there weren't the sterilizations before. And then, that allows everyone to continue to operate sexual abusive situations without any consequence, which is, again, terrifying.
It is. These poor, helpless patients.
Do you know, I know you wanted to move on from the sterilization.
No,
but,
it's fine.
But I had read that Sonoma County, and the reason is that this place was operating. Sonoma County has a really, like one of the highest rates of sterilization in the whole country.
Yeah.
It's like abnormally high, which is pretty intense. And
they did a bunch of them there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then to have I can't imagine. I just can't imagine someone going to work and thinking, oh, these people, no one will find out, no one will care, so I can just act out my worst fantasies.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck as the victim, not being able to do anything, not being able to, just screaming in your head. It's like, have you ever had one of those episodes where you're asleep and you wake up and you can't move, your sleep paralyzation, right? Is that what it's called?
I've never experienced that, but I know people who have. It sounds absolutely
and you're
terrifying.
trapped and you want to scream and you want to call for help and you can't.
Has it happened to you?
Yes, twice. And
Oh,
it
wow.
was absolutely the most frightening experience. And that was only, seconds, and nobody was doing anything to me, but my head was screaming and I couldn't move. And that's the most terrified I've ever been.
It sounds like just about the worst thing ever.
Hmm.
Did you see anything? Often people will see like an entity or something like sitting on their chest.
I thought I was in process of being kidnapped by aliens and I was going to get probed or something. I just felt like something um, otherworldly was invading my body at the time and causing me to be stuck.
That's pretty typical of, there's different versions of it, but yeah, it's pretty scary. I'm not interested in that at all.
No, I'm not. And then the idea of, if you did encounter a ghost, someone who'd been treated so horribly and didn't have a voice and wasn't allowed to express their horror, and then that person is now, inhabiting your car, your body, coming with you in your house, and all you can hear is silent screaming in your head. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. And one thing that I've always thought about sleep paralysis, people will say that it's all just imaginary, like none of it's real. But on the other hand, people do see some commonalities, some common things. So what if you're in a state that's between waking and sleep where you're able to get a peek into the other realm or something,
Ooh.
Who knows?
Yes, that would have been much more interesting. I didn't get a peek into any other realm. I just felt like something was
Like,
causing me to be like forcing me into submission. That's how it felt. It felt like there was something that had entered my body and forced me into submission.
so weird.
Yeah.
Did you have any missing time? Did you wake up in the middle of like a field somewhere?
No, that would be amazing though.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah. But it definitely make your life more interesting, an adventure.
Yeah, maybe not a good adventure.
Hmm. Did you get, so you went there, you went to this place, this
Uh-huh.
developmental center, and you were on the campus walking around. Did it feel creepy? Did you feel anything, any sort of spiritual vibrations from this area?
Yeah, it felt super creepy. And there were certain areas where it was fine, but then there were certain areas like we'd go and stand in the middle of like a lawn or something. And that particular area felt like super creepy for some reason.
Really? Maybe
Yeah,
that's
so
where the bodies were buried.
maybe the one that felt the creepiest was actually on the main street on, I think it's Arnold Drive. And it was just one of the houses. It was, if you're going towards the south, I think it would be one of the last houses before you get to like a gas station and stuff. We stood on the lawn for a little bit just to kind of look at stuff. And for whatever reason, that place felt really creepy. I don't know why.
Maybe it's the home of a former orderly.
It could be. But there were a lot of places that definitely felt creepy. And I did do some EVP while I was there. A lot of it, so I guess EVP, you ask, are there any spirits here? What's your name? And ask them questions. Most of it, I didn't notice anything unusual, but I did get a couple of unusual things in the recording, and I'll play some of those for you. The first one I recorded, and this one was at just in front of a building next to where we parked. It was across from the main building. And I said, are there any spirits here or something? And I saw on the recording something that was like low pitch or low frequency, so you couldn't hear it. But I could see that there was a very large waveform there.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see there's a waveform there. It's big, but it's below the range of hearing. So I pitch shifted it up to see what it would sound like. And here's what it sounded like. What is your name?
Oh yeah, I heard it. I heard that.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be like a voice or something. I don't know. It's pretty weird. And I wasn't expecting to find anything on the recordings. I figured it'd just be a waste of time. But when I saw that and I made it a little bit louder and I pitch shifted, I was like, well, that's really creepy, actually. Were the spirits talking to me? I don't know.
Well, we're all energy. All this energy goes somewhere, gets dispersed right back into the universe. So yeah, I absolutely believe in EVP for sure.
Well, let's see what else we have here. We are at the Sonoma Developmental Center, standing in the middle of the old No, not Ferris wheel. What is this thing?
Carousel.
Carousel. We're standing in the middle of the old carousel. What is your name? And then here's another one from the carousel. Oh, come on, ask the spirits something.
I don't even know.
Just ask them something.
What year is it?
Oh, that's a good one. What? Oh. Did you hear that?
What? Whoa.
It sounded like he's saying, what?
Yeah.
No.
No.
And we weren't making noises. We were being completely quiet. You hear the beeping. That was the...
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Because you could, like, spirit world, how would you know? What difference does it make time, what year it is or time or decade or whatever?
Or maybe they didn't understand the question or something.
What? No.
But you could hear the beeping of the camcorder. It was like warning me it was going to turn off.
Uh-huh.
And that's what that beeping was. But that one was weird. Like, that's probably the best one I got was that one. The what no.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see the next one we got here.
How did you die?
Did you hear that?
Sounded tasery.
It sounded like there's somebody whispering.
Mm-hmm.
I can turn these up a little bit too here. Let's turn this up. Okay, let's see what. Do you want to go home?
Oh. Oh, yeah.
So that one was weird because, like I said, we were standing still. We weren't making any noise.
Mm-hmm.
Then I asked, do you want to go home? And then I heard like those noises. Like
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't me touching the recorder. That
Mm-hmm.
I was just standing there. So what was that? I don't know.
It sounded like multiple people.
Yeah.
To me, it sounded like multiple people trying to speak at once.
Or touch the microphone or something is pretty creepy. All right, we just got a couple more of these. If there's anything else you'd like to tell us, please do so now.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. Saying, invest in Bitcoin.
Well, that one, there was no voices, but as soon as I asked the question, the wind started blowing.
Oh, that's the wind?
Yeah, that's the wind.
Invest in Bitcoin. I hear the wind is teaching us where we should put our money.
Oh, no, I've got a couple more. Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear them.
Okay, let's hear them.
We're at the Sonoma Developmental Center, and I found a cage near one of the buildings.
A cage?
I'm guessing this is a cage for patients who were unable to be on their own, unsupervised.
Like what, a lion
cage? But they still
cage?
wanted
Like
them
that?
to get outdoor exposure, to be outside.
Yeah, like a cage.
And they might put them in this cage for their own protection. Some of the patients
Oh,
were
wow.
unable to
Shark
be outside
cage.
by themselves.
Mhm.
But anyways, this seems like a spooky place. Perfect place for some more EVP. Are there any spirits present? Did you hear that? I had to boost it, but there's like a higher pitch, like it sounds like somebody's saying something, but it might not be that obvious.
Can we hear it again?
Yeah, sure. When you'll hear it when it gets,
it's the higher pitch I need to listen for.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm listening for the wind.
You'll hear it when it gets louder. It sounds like a something like that, right? Did you hear it that time?
Did you say out? Do you hear an out?
I heard an out, maybe like a get out or something.
Out. Oh my God. Could you imagine if you are murdered in one certain place, in or you die sitting out there in this cage, and then your energy is just locked there forever, and you're just stuck in that space. Out, reverberates throughout history, and anyone who comes into that area is just, oh my God.
That one kind of did sound like get out or something like that. Yeah,
You never can get out.
That's what I'm like. That I was really surprised when I did the EVP. I'm like, there's not going to be anything there, but I found some stuff that was like, whoa, that's actually pretty.
Did you get a traveler?
I hope not. We'll find out. We just went like a couple days ago.
Stage this place.
Yeah. All right, let's try the next one here. What is your name?
I heard that.
Did you hear that?
So I have no, it was
Something, yeah. What is your name?
wow.
Weird, right?
That's crazy. It's like they're just waiting.
Yeah,
It was such a quick response too. They're just wait, just ask me what the right question.
yeah. And then the last one I have here
Wow.
is there anything else that you'd like to tell us? And then that one, there's no disembodied voices or anything, but just like the other time when I asked them and then the wind started up again, and then the birds started talking and there's more activity there. So is there coincidence? Does it mean anything? I don't know. Probably not.
I don't know, but the next to last was wow, that was so visceral.
Yeah, there's some pretty creepy ones. I was pretty surprised at the results I got.
Wow. Yeah, I wonder what it would be like inside. Yeah, I wonder if that voice, the Get Out voice, he died in the cage. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking like you're out there, someone forgets to bring you in. Maybe you're sickly.
Yeah,
because you think 1,500 people died in
At
that
least.
short, and we don't know anything about those 1,500 people died before they started record keeping in what 1940, 1930 something. So I mean that's in. Who knows how they died or where they died?
Yeah,
That whole place is probably covered in ghosts.
the
just
whole place.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so many people were tortured, and
Oh, that's terrible.
so many people suffered there. It's probably a very active place. But surprisingly, I couldn't find a whole lot of like personal stories. For a lot of places, people will have plenty of stories, like the Hotel Rosa, for example, which is in downtown Santa Rosa, is haunted apparently. And there's plenty of stories you can find online. But for this one, all I could find is people saying, I know somebody who has a story, or I have a story. PM me if you want it. But the post was like 2 years ago or something, so they're not going to get back to you.
Well, the institution would have wanted to cover it up, of course. They because it's money. Everything's about money.
Yeah.
We can't let any people think anything negative happen here. And then over time, it just gets lost.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
All right. So that's pretty much all I had. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to say about the Sonoma Developmental Center? It's super creepy and you should go.
Yes. I think agents who are not us should go back and do a podcast from the site.
Yeah. But not us, somebody else who doesn't do illegal, or we don't do illegal things. We know our friends do though.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Those people. Yeah, go inside and check it out and see if there's a furnace. I want to know more now. I'm really curious to know more, and I feel terrible for those victims. I hope the victims went and they haunted the perpetrators after their deaths.
I hope so.
Those
Yeah.
perpetrators lived horribly short lives after that.
One would only hope.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys. That's all we got for you this time. Thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, keep it strange.